Nicholas Reed had buried the past, until he saw her bracelet. A little girl in the park, dark curls, bright blue eyes, and a silver bracelet with tiny heart charms, the same one he had given Catherine Watson 7 years ago. The woman who vanished. His pulse pounded. There was only one explanation. And he needed answers. Nicholas Reed never expected his past to find him on an ordinary afternoon in the park. He had come here for a break, a rare moment away from the chaos of boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. His mind had been cluttered with thoughts of business deals, numbers, and market expansions, things that had defined his life for years. He walked slowly along the paved path, hands in the pockets of his tailored coat, barely paying attention to the people around him. The park was filled with families, couples, and joggers, all lost in their own worlds. It was peaceful in a way he rarely allowed himself to experience. Then he saw her. A little girl sat alone on a wooden bench, swinging her legs as she examined something in her hands. She couldn't have been older than 6. Her dark brown curls framed her delicate face, and her piercing blue eyes were focused intently on the silver bracelet wrapped around her wrist. Nicholas's steps faltered. His breath caught in his throat as he recognized the bracelet. It was small, delicate, with tiny heart charms that glinted in the sunlight. It was the exact same bracelet he had given Catherine Watson 7 years ago. The woman he had loved. The woman who had vanished without a trace. His pulse quickened as he approached the girl, his usual confidence shaken. He wasn't sure why, but something deep inside told him that this moment would change everything. He stopped a few feet away, hesitating before speaking. "That's a beautiful bracelet," he said, keeping his voice gentle. The girl looked up at him, her bright blue eyes locking onto his. There was something unsettlingly familiar about them. "Thank you," she said, glancing back down at the bracelet. "It was my mom's." Nicholas swallowed hard. He had suspected it the moment he saw it, but hearing the words confirmed everything. His heart pounded. He had to ask. "What's your mom's name?" The girl tilted her head slightly, as if the question surprised her. "Catherine," she said simply. Nicholas felt the world tilt. She was here. Catherine was here. And this little girl. She had his eyes. Nicholas stood frozen, his mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. The little girl in front of him, Catherine's daughter, was staring at him with quiet curiosity, unaware of the storm raging inside him. Catherine. She was here. After all these years, after all the questions, the sleepless nights wondering why she had left, she was here. And she had a daughter. A daughter with his blue eyes. His heart pounded as he crouched down to the girl's level, carefully keeping his voice even. "What's your name?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Ellie." Ellie. The name felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like something that had always existed in his world but had somehow remained hidden from him. "Ellie," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "That's a beautiful name." She smiled, small but genuine. "Mom picked it." His chest tightened at the mention of Catherine. "Is she here?" he asked carefully. Ellie nodded, glancing toward the end of the park. "We live over there." She pointed toward a quiet street lined with small houses. "She told me not to go too far." Nicholas exhaled slowly, trying to ground himself in the moment. This was real. Catherine was just minutes away. And for the first time in 7 years, he had a chance to get the answers that had haunted him since the day she disappeared. But first, he needed to know something else. "Ellie," he said gently, "do you know your father?" The question made her pause. She looked down at her bracelet, running her small fingers over the silver hearts. "No," she admitted. "Mom never told me." A sharp pang of regret stabbed through him. "She said he was busy," Ellie continued. "That he had important things to do." Nicholas clenched his jaw. That's what Catherine had told their daughter. That he had been too busy. He wanted to be angry, but more than that, he wanted to understand. Do you ever wonder about him? He asked. Ellie shrugged. Sometimes. But I think if he wanted to find me, he would have. Nicholas inhaled sharply. If he had known, nothing would have stopped him from finding her. He took a slow breath and made a decision. Would you take me to meet your mom? Ellie hesitated, as if considering whether or not she should. But something in Nicholas's expression must have convinced her, because after a moment, she nodded. Okay, she said, sliding off the bench. Follow me. Nicholas stood, his pulse racing as he walked beside her. In just a few minutes, he would finally see Catherine again. And this time, she wouldn't be able to walk away without an explanation. Nicholas followed Ellie down the winding path of the park, his thoughts tangled in a whirlwind of emotions. The sound of leaves crunching beneath their feet was the only thing grounding him in reality. Every few steps, he glanced at the little girl walking beside him, still struggling to process what she had just told him. She had no idea who her father was. Catherine had never told her. The weight of that truth settled deep in his chest. For years, he had thought about Catherine, where she had gone, why she had left, whether she had ever thought about him. But never, never, had he imagined that she had left carrying his child. Now, with every step he took, the past he thought was behind him was unraveling before his eyes. Ellie walked with the carefree steps of a child, her small hand gripping the bracelet that had started it all. She didn't seem to realize the magnitude of what was happening, that with each step, she was leading him straight into the past he had been forced to bury. Finally, they turned onto a quiet street lined with modest homes. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and the distant aroma of dinner cooking. It was a simple neighborhood, far removed from the world of luxury Nicholas lived in. Ellie stopped in front of a small house with white shutters and a worn brick walkway. The porch light flickered slightly, casting a warm glow in the fading evening. This is it, she said, pointing toward the door. Nicholas stared at the house, his pulse quickening. Catherine was inside. 7 years. 7 years of unanswered questions, of searching, of wondering why she had left, and now, just beyond that door, she had the answers. He turned to Ellie, swallowing hard. Does your mom know you're bringing me here? Ellie shook her head. No, but she'll be happy. I think. She hesitated. She doesn't have a lot of visitors. Nicholas exhaled, nodding. There was no turning back now. He stepped onto the porch and knocked. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, soft footsteps approached from inside. The door opened. And there she was. Catherine Watson. She froze the moment she saw him. Her deep brown eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. For a split second, she looked exactly the way she had the last time he saw her, stunning, soft, and utterly unforgettable. But then, reality set in. Her expression shifted from shock to something unreadable. Nicholas, she breathed, gripping the doorframe as if she needed to steady herself. Nicholas's jaw tightened. There were so many things he could say, so many things he wanted to say, but only one question mattered. Why? Catherine swallowed hard, her eyes flickering toward Ellie, who was watching them both with quiet curiosity. Ellie, sweetheart, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Why don't you go inside for a bit? Ellie hesitated but nodded. Okay. She disappeared into the house, leaving them alone. Nicholas took a slow breath, steadying himself. 7 years, Catherine, he said, his voice low. 7 years, and you never told me I had a daughter. Catherine closed her eyes for a brief moment before meeting his gaze again. I wanted to, she whispered. But I was afraid. Nicholas clenched his fists, fighting to keep his emotions in check. Afraid of what? She swallowed hard. Afraid that you wouldn't want her. The words cut deeper than he expected. He had imagined every possible reason for why she had left, another man, a change of heart, even the idea that she had simply moved on. But this? The idea that she had kept his own child from him because she thought he wouldn't want her. That was something he couldn't accept. "Catherine," he said, his voice sharper now, "you didn't give me a choice." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I know." Nicholas exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to be furious. He should be furious. But more than anything, he just wanted to understand. He looked past her, into the small house, where his daughter, was now waiting inside. Finally, he met Catherine's gaze again. "Tell me everything," he said. Because no matter how much time had passed, no matter how many questions remained unanswered, one thing was clear, he wasn't leaving without the truth. Catherine stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," she said softly. Nicholas hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The house was small but warm. The soft glow of the lamps gave it a cozy atmosphere, and the faint scent of vanilla lingered in the air. It was nothing like the modern, pristine spaces he was used to, but it felt lived in, loved, His eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. A stack of children's books sat neatly on the coffee table. A few drawings were pinned to the refrigerator. A small pink backpack rested by the door. Signs of a life he had missed. Catherine led him to the living room, motioning for him to sit. He remained standing. Ellie's footsteps echoed faintly from the hallway, but she stayed out of sight, giving them space. Nicholas turned back to Catherine, his blue eyes dark with restrained emotion. "Start from the beginning." She let out a slow breath, folding her arms as if bracing herself. "I never meant to disappear," she admitted. "I was scared, Nicholas." He scoffed. "Scared of what? Of me?" Her gaze flickered downward. "Of how you'd react." Nicholas clenched his jaw. "So instead of telling me, you ran?" Catherine lifted her chin, her brown eyes flashing. "You had your whole life planned out. You were about to expand your company internationally. I knew what you wanted, Nicholas, and it wasn't this," she gestured vaguely around the room. Nicholas exhaled sharply. "You didn't even give me a chance." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I thought I was doing the right thing. You were so focused, so determined to succeed. I convinced myself that if I told you, it would ruin everything for you." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "And what about Ellie? You didn't think she deserved to know who her father was?" Catherine flinched at his words. "I planned to tell her. I didn't know when." She shook her head. "It was never supposed to be like this. I thought maybe, someday, when she was older, when you weren't so untouchable." Nicholas let out a bitter laugh. "Untouchable?" He ran a hand through his dark brown hair. "You really believed I wouldn't have wanted her?" Catherine's lip trembled slightly, and for the first time, he saw guilt in her expression. "I didn't know, Nick. I didn't know if you'd want to be a father. And I couldn't take the risk of you saying no." Nicholas took a step forward, lowering his voice. "You took that choice away from me." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I know." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything left unsaid. After a long moment, Catherine exhaled shakily. "I never stopped thinking about you." Nicholas closed his eyes briefly, the weight of the past pressing against his chest. "You should have come back." She nodded slowly. "I know." He looked toward the hallway, where Ellie was still out of sight. The little girl who had no idea she had been kept from him. The little girl who had his eyes, his blood, his name, *, even if she didn't know it yet, *. When he turned back to Catherine, his expression was unreadable. What now? Catherine wiped at her eyes before squaring her shoulders. That's up to you. Nicholas studied her for a long moment. Then he made his decision. I'm not leaving. Catherine's breath hitched. For 7 years, I didn't know I had a daughter, he said firmly. That ends today. A single tear slipped down her cheek. You mean that? His gaze didn't waver. I do. For the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what he needed to do. He had missed 7 years of his daughter's life. But he wasn't going to miss another second. The weight of Nicholas's words settled between them, shifting something unspoken in the air. He had spent years making decisions with absolute certainty, but nothing had ever felt as final as the words "I'm not leaving." Catherine studied him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. She must have expected hesitation, conditions, anything but this unwavering certainty. But there was none. She swallowed hard, nodding. Okay. Nicholas exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. So what do we tell Ellie? Catherine hesitated. I don't know. She glanced toward the hallway where their daughter remained just out of sight. I don't want to overwhelm her. She's still just a kid. Nicholas nodded, understanding the concern, but that didn't change the reality. She deserves to know. I know, Catherine said softly. I don't know how to tell her in a way that won't confuse her. Nicholas ran a hand through his dark brown hair, exhaling slowly. Then we do it together. For the first time in 7 years, he wasn't facing this alone. Catherine's lips pressed together, and after a moment, she nodded. Okay. Let's do it. Nicholas turned toward the hallway. Ellie? There was a brief pause before small footsteps approached. She peeked around the corner, her blue eyes flickering between them. Yes. Nicholas motioned her forward. Come here, sweetheart. Ellie stepped into the room, hesitantly climbing onto the couch next to her mother. She curled her legs beneath her, her small fingers still gripping her bracelet. Is something wrong? Catherine smiled gently, reaching out to brush a curl from Ellie's forehead. No, sweetheart. We need to talk to you about something important. Ellie's brows knitted together in confusion, but she nodded. Okay. Nicholas took a deep breath. Ellie, do you remember when you said you didn't know who your dad was? She nodded again, watching him closely. Well, Nicholas continued carefully, that's because your mom never told you. Ellie blinked. Why? Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand. Because I was scared, honey. I wasn't sure what was best for you. Ellie tilted her head slightly. But I have a dad. Nicholas felt his heart tighten. Yes, he said, his voice steady. You do. Ellie stared at him for a moment, then her eyes widened slightly. It's you. Nicholas nodded, bracing himself for whatever came next. Ellie didn't move at first. Her little fingers traced the silver hearts on her bracelet, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, You really mean it? Nicholas leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees so he could look directly into her eyes. I mean it. Ellie swallowed. So, you're my dad. Nicholas nodded again, his throat tight. Yes. Ellie processed this for a long moment before looking at Catherine. Did you know? Catherine nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I knew. Ellie's lips parted, and for a second, Nicholas was afraid she would be angry. But instead, she let out a small breath and said, Oh. It was such a simple word, but it carried the weight of years of unanswered questions. Nicholas felt like the air had shifted, like something invisible had snapped into place. Does this mean, Ellie hesitated, that you're going to stay? Nicholas didn't even need to think. Yes, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Ellie searched his face, as if trying to decide whether she believed him. Then, after a long pause, she did something that completely shattered him. She reached out, tentatively at first, then placed her small hand over his. Nicholas inhaled sharply. It was the first time she had willingly touched him. Ellie looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." Nicholas curled his fingers gently around hers. For the first time, she was letting him in. And he wasn't going to let her down. That night, Nicholas lay awake in the unfamiliar quiet of Catherine's house. His mind refused to settle, replaying the events of the day over and over. He had come to the park expecting nothing more than a brief moment of solitude, but instead, he had found her, his daughter. Ellie had barely spoken after the conversation in the living room. She had accepted his words, but Nicholas knew that acceptance wasn't the same as trust. It would take time. He wasn't sure how to be patient. He wasn't sure how to be a father. A soft noise from the hallway pulled him from his thoughts. He sat up, listening. The house was mostly dark except for the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the window. Another sound, small footsteps. He pushed the blanket aside and stood, stepping out into the dimly lit hallway. A small figure stood near the kitchen entrance, barely visible in the shadows. "Ellie," he called gently. She turned, her blue eyes wide. She was still wearing her pajamas, her tiny frame wrapped in a blanket, her dark curls messy from sleep. "I didn't mean to wake you," she said softly. Nicholas shook his head. "You didn't." He took a few steps closer. "Couldn't sleep?" Ellie hesitated before nodding. Nicholas glanced at the clock on the wall, past midnight. "Do you want to talk about it?" Ellie hesitated again. Then, after a moment, she nodded and walked toward the couch. She climbed up, pulling her blanket tightly around her. Nicholas sat beside her, leaving enough space so she wouldn't feel trapped but close enough that she knew he was there. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, Ellie looked up at him. "Are you mad at my mom?" she asked. Nicholas exhaled. He had spent years being angry, at Catherine, at himself, at the unanswered questions. But now, sitting here with Ellie, it didn't seem to matter anymore. "No," he said honestly. "I was. For a long time. But not anymore." Ellie watched him carefully. "Because you found me?" Nicholas felt something tighten in his chest. "Because I found you," he said, his voice quieter now. Ellie was silent for a moment, tracing patterns on the fabric of her blanket. "I used to wonder what my dad was like," she admitted. "I imagined he was really important. That he was too busy to find me." Nicholas's throat tightened. "I wasn't too busy," he said. "I didn't know." Ellie blinked, processing his words. "You really would have come if you knew." Nicholas didn't hesitate. In a heartbeat. Ellie seemed to think about that for a long time. Then she looked down at her hands. "Mom always said I have your eyes." Nicholas let out a small breath of amusement. She was right. Ellie shifted, tucking her knees up to her chest. "You don't seem as scary as I thought you would." Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "Scary?" Ellie gave a small shrug. "Mom said you were important. That you had a big job. I thought that meant you didn't smile." Nicholas smirked. "I smile sometimes." Ellie gave him a pointed look. "I haven't seen it yet." His smirk deepened. "You will." A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips, but she quickly hid it by resting her chin on her knees. Nicholas leaned back against the couch. "Do you want to try sleeping again?" Ellie hesitated. Then she whispered, "Can I stay out here for a little?" Nicholas nodded. "Of course." They sat in silence for a while, the room dim and quiet except for the occasional hum of cars passing outside. Eventually, Ellie's eyes grew heavy, her head tilting slightly as sleep took over. Nicholas watched as she curled up against the couch, her breathing slowing. He reached out and carefully adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. For the first time, she had let him be there for her. And he wasn't going anywhere. Nicholas woke up to the soft glow of early morning light filtering through the curtains. He hadn't meant to fall asleep on the couch, but sometime during the night, exhaustion had caught up with him. He shifted slightly, feeling the weight of a small figure still curled up beside him. Ellie. She was still asleep, her tiny frame tucked into the blanket, her dark curls spilling over the pillow. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. Nicholas remained still, watching her for a moment. It was surreal. Less than 24 hours ago, he hadn't known she existed. Now, she was here, curled up beside him, trusting him enough to sleep next to him. The realization settled deep in his chest. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was a father. Carefully, he stood up, making sure not to wake her. He stretched his stiff muscles and made his way to the kitchen, unsure of what exactly to do next. His routine had always been simple: wake up, check emails, head to work. Now, there was someone else to think about. He opened the fridge, scanning its contents. It was nearly empty, aside from a few takeout containers and a carton of eggs. His usual breakfast was coffee and whatever was quick. But that wouldn't work now. Ellie needed more than that. Determined, he pulled out the eggs and found a pan. He wasn't much of a cook, but scrambled eggs seemed simple enough. As he cracked the eggs into the bowl, he heard small footsteps padding into the kitchen. "Morning," Ellie mumbled, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Nicholas turned, a spatula in his hand. "Morning." She climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs, watching him with curiosity. "You cook?" He smirked. "I'm trying." Ellie leaned on the table, still groggy. "Mom made the best pancakes." Nicholas paused for a second before turning back to the pan. "I'll have to learn how to make them, then." Ellie looked surprised. "You would do that?" Nicholas glanced at her. "Why not?" Ellie shrugged. "I don't know. It's just different." Nicholas scooped the eggs onto 2 plates and placed one in front of her. "Different good or different bad?" Ellie poked at the eggs with her fork. "I'm not sure yet." Nicholas let out a short chuckle. "Fair enough." They ate in silence for a few moments, the quiet not uncomfortable but thoughtful. Ellie took small bites, her legs swinging slightly beneath the chair. Finally, she looked up at him. "Are you going back to your big job today?" Nicholas took a sip of his coffee, considering his answer. He had spent years prioritizing work above everything else. But now? "No," he said. "Not today." Ellie's eyebrows lifted. "Really?" Nicholas nodded. "I thought we could go get some things for your room. Make it more yours." Ellie hesitated. "Like what?" "Whatever you want," Nicholas said simply. "New bedding, decorations, books. Maybe some paint." Ellie's lips twitched, as if she was fighting a smile. "Mom let me pick the color in our old house." Nicholas leaned forward. "What color?" "Blue." He smirked. "Of course." Ellie tilted her head. "Why, of course?" Nicholas tapped his temple. "Because you have my eyes." A small laugh escaped her lips, but she quickly covered it with another bite of eggs. Nicholas watched her carefully, the way she was slowly relaxing around him, the way the uncertainty in her gaze was being replaced with something softer. For the first time, she was letting herself believe he was staying. And for the first time, Nicholas knew he had something more important to build than any business deal. He had a daughter. And he wasn't going to waste another moment. The day passed in a way Nicholas had never experienced before. His usual schedule would have been filled with back-to-back meetings, calls, and negotiations. Instead, he found himself walking through a department store, following a 6-year-old girl as she carefully picked out things for her new room. Ellie wasn't impulsive with her choices. She took her time, studying each option as if making a decision that would define her entire world. She ran her small fingers over soft blankets, examined shelves of books with a thoughtful tilt of her head, and hesitated at the paint section for longer than expected. "You sure about blue?" Nicholas asked as she traced her fingers over a color swatch. Ellie nodded. "Mom let me pick last time. I think she'd like if I had the same color here." Nicholas swallowed the lump in his throat. It still hit him sometimes, the realization of how much he had missed, how many choices like this he had never been a part of. But he was here now. And he was staying. "Then blue it is," he said. Ellie smiled, small but genuine, and Nicholas knew it had nothing to do with the paint. The next few hours were spent assembling furniture, unpacking books, and placing small personal touches around the room. Ellie didn't ask for much. She didn't fill the space with toys or extravagant decorations. She was careful with what she chose, as if she wasn't entirely sure how long she'd be staying. Nicholas noticed. By the time evening rolled around, the room was no longer just a guest room. It was hers. Ellie stood in the doorway, looking at it as if still unsure. "It's different," she murmured. Nicholas studied her expression. "Good different?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah." Nicholas exhaled, feeling something settle inside him. They had dinner together, something simple, something normal. Ellie told him about her favorite books, the ones she wanted to read again. She asked him questions about his job, what he actually did every day. He answered as best he could, keeping the explanation simple, watching as she tried to piece together who he was outside of just being her father. Later that night, she climbed into bed, pulling the blankets up to her chin. Nicholas sat in the chair beside her, holding a book she had picked. "Ready?" Ellie nodded. He read to her, his voice steady, falling into a rhythm that felt more natural than he expected. Halfway through, her eyes began to flutter shut, her breathing slowing. Nicholas was about to stand when her small voice stopped him. "You'll still be here tomorrow, right?" His chest tightened at how soft the question was, how much she was trying not to sound like she was afraid. Nicholas leaned forward, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere, Ellie." She let out a small breath, her fingers tightening slightly around the blanket. "Okay." Nicholas stayed for a few minutes after she fell asleep, watching the rise and fall of her chest, the way her expression had finally relaxed. He had spent years believing success meant never stopping, never settling, never allowing himself to be tied down. But here, in the quiet of his daughter's room, he realized he had been wrong. Success wasn't about power or control. It was about this. And he wasn't going to let it go. This story is more than just a tale of lost love and unexpected reunions, it's about redemption, responsibility, and the power of second chances. Nicholas Reed starts as a man who believes he has everything figured out. He built an empire, prioritized success, and convinced himself that the past no longer mattered. But fate had other plans. The moment he saw the bracelet on Ellie's wrist, his carefully controlled world cracked, forcing him to confront the life he never knew he had. What makes this story compelling is not just the revelation that Nicholas has a daughter, but his transformation from a man focused on wealth and power to someone who understands what truly matters. He doesn't become a father instantly, trust isn't built in a day. Ellie is cautious, hesitant to let him in, and rightfully so. But through patience, persistence, and genuine care, Nicholas proves that he's not just here because of obligation. He chooses her. Catherine's role is just as crucial. She isn't simply a woman from his past, she's a mother who made difficult choices, ones she believed were best for her daughter. Her reasons for leaving are complex, but her love for Ellie is undeniable. And when Nicholas returns, she must decide whether to let him in or keep protecting the life she built. The ending isn't just about a man finding his family, it's about earning them. Nicholas doesn't erase the years he missed, but he shows that he's here now, and he's staying. Ellie's quiet acceptance of him, her willingness to trust little by little, makes the conclusion all the more powerful. In the end, this story proves that love, whether romantic, parental, or familial, isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, about choosing someone even when it's difficult, about making up for lost time the best way you can. Nicholas didn't just reclaim his past. He built a future worth fighting for.